Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something you might not expect, the power of relationships in the NBA.
Interesting topic, right? Most people just think about the athleticism, the highlight reels.
Right. But our sources are calling it relationship literacy, saying it's like the secret weapon behind some of the biggest teams and players.
Yeah, it's a fascinating take. Like, we usually just focus on the physical skills,
Exactly. So let's get into it. What exactly eyes this relationship literacy in the NBA?
Well, think of it as like a set of skills that helps these players navigate all the relationships in the league. It's about building trust, not just with teammates, but coaches, fans, even the media.
That's a lot of relationships to manage.
It is, and it goes way deeper than you'd think. We're talking emotional intelligence, communication, conflict resolution, even legal and financial stuff.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just about being buddies with your teammates. So why is all this so important in the NBA? You'd think raw talent would be enough.
You'd think so, but the sources actually argue that this stuff goes beyond just winning games.
Really?
Yeah, it's more about creating this environment where players can actually thrive, not just on the court, but off the court too. It's about well-being for everyone involved.
And it's interesting, the NBA actually has programs to prevent relationship abuse and violence, which is not what you usually hear about.
Right. It shows they get it, that healthy relationships matter, not just for performance, but for, the whole person.
Makes sense. Okay, so let's get specific. Our sources talk a lot about team cohesion. How does that tie into all this relationship stuff?
Team cohesion, hugely important, especially in the NBA where you have guys from all different backgrounds under immense pressure.
Right, so much competition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And our sources say that emotional intelligence is key here, it's the foundation.
Emotional intelligence, so being able to read people.
That, but also being self-aware, controlling your own emotions, understanding other people's feelings. That helps build trust, which leads to better communication, better teamwork on the court.
And the sources mention some specific teams like the 90s Bulls and that Warriors dynasty as examples of this, right?
Absolutely. Phil Jackson with the Bulls, he was big on mindfulness, teamwork. Then you have Steve Kerr with the Warriors, fostering this culture of joy, compassion.
Two very different approaches, but both successful.
Exactly. They both got that it wasn't just about talent, it was about the environment, making players feel valued, connected.
That makes sense. So it's not just about being nice, it's about a system where everyone can actually reach their potential. But the NBA is also so competitive. How do players balance that with needing to cooperate?
Good point. And our sources emphasize that constructive feedback and open communication are crucial.
Like challenging each other, but in a positive way.
Yeah. Players are encouraged to push each other to be better, but respectfully, supportively. It's not about tearing someone down, it's about growth.
And this applies to coaches too, right? The whole organization.
Totally. It's about creating a culture of continuous improvement where everyone's comfortable giving and receiving feedback.
Makes sense. Now, the sources also talk about diversity and inclusion. How does that fit into this relationship literacy idea?
Well, think about it. The NBA is global, right?
Yeah.
Players from all over the world.
Different cultures, backgrounds, everything.
Exactly. And the sources emphasize that embracing that diversity is essential for a strong team.
I can imagine that comes with challenges, though, right?
Yeah.
So many different personalities, perspectives.
Of course. But the league has programs, initiatives to help with this. Like the sources mention cultural sensitivity training, workshops on implicit bias, all about creating that feeling of belonging, respect.
So it's about making everyone feel valued, even if they're different.
Exactly. And that contributes to a stronger team bond, a more positive culture overall.
Okay, now our sources get into the support systems players need throughout their careers. This sounds really interesting.
Yeah, so imagine you're a rookie, fresh out of college, maybe even from another country. Suddenly you're in the NBA. Media attention, financial pressure, the demands of the game itself.
It'd be overwhelming for sure.
Totally. And that's where this relationship literacy comes in big time. The NBA has this whole rookie orientation program.
What, like a welcome to the NBA crash course?
Pretty much. They cover everything from finances to dealing with the media to understanding the league's rules.
Wow, so it's not just about basketball skills?
Nope. And a huge part of this is mentorship. Veteran players are assigned to rookies to guide them, share their experiences.
So it's like having someone who's been there, done that, to help you navigate it all.
Exactly. And the sources say these relationships can be super impactful, helping rookies adjust, develop, both as players and as people.
Sounds like a really valuable system. And the sources also talk about veterans transitioning into leadership roles, right? Not just on the court, but as mentors in their communities.
Yeah, it creates this continuity. Veterans giving back, sharing their knowledge. It's a cycle of support and growth.
Okay, so we've covered team stuff, diversity, support systems. But what about the personal lives of these guys? How do they balance this crazy career with family, relationships?
That's a great question. And the sources don't shy away from it. The NBA life is demanding. Constant travel, media attention, the pressure to perform. It can be tough on personal relationships.
I bet. So how do they manage it all?
Well, the sources emphasize communication, open dialogue, finding ways to stay connected even when they're apart. Like players talk about using technology to stay in touch with family while they're on the road.
So making those relationships a priority, even when it's hard.
Exactly. And the league is starting to recognize this more and more. Some teams have family travel programs or on-site childcare during games.
So they're acknowledging that family matters.
Absolutely. It's part of a more holistic approach to player development, recognizing that success isn't just about what happens on the court, but about mental, emotional, relational well-being too.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we've talked about team dynamics, diversity, mentorship, balancing career and personal life. But there's another huge G element we haven't touched yet. Money.
Oh yeah, suddenly you're a young player with millions in the bank. It's a whole new world to navigate.
And our sources get into the potential problems. Scams, bad investments, pressure from family and friends. It can be a lot to handle.
It is. That's why financial literacy is such a crucial part of this whole relationship literacy thing in the NBA.
Right, you got to know how to manage that wealth.
Exactly. Making smart investments, protecting yourself from people who might try to take advantage.
And the sources explain how the league actually provides a lot of education and resources to help players with this.
Yeah, they have programs to prevent scams, financial advisors, everything. It's about setting these guys up for success, not just during their NBA years, but for life after basketball.
That's really important. Okay, so financial literacy is huge, but what about managing their public image, dealing with the media? That seems like a whole other level of this relationship stuff.
Oh, absolutely. The NBA is high profile. Players are constantly in the public eye. They need to be aware of how their actions are perceived, how to manage their image.
Right, one wrong move can go viral these days.
Exactly. And the sources talk about how players get media training to help them with all this.
Yeah.
Interviews, press conferences, social media, the whole 9 yards.
So they learn how to, craft their message, handle tough questions.
Yeah, it's about building a positive relationship with the media, the public, but also protecting their privacy.
Sounds like a tough balancing act.
It definitely is. It's a constant process of learning and adapting.
Wow, we've covered so much ground already in this first part of our deep dive into NBA relationship literacy. It's fascinating to see how this idea impacts so many areas of a player's life.
It really highlights how complex the NBA is and how important these skills are, not just for success on the court, but for a fulfilling career overall.
I'm definitely eager to hear more.
Yeah.
So what are some specific examples of players and teams that have really embraced this concept and used it to achieve success? We'll dive into that after a quick break.
All right, so let's jump into some specific examples of this whole relationship literacy thing playing out in the NBA. We touched on mentorship before, but our sources really zero in on the rookie orientation as like a make or break moment.
Yeah, because it's way more than just learning plays, right?
Right, absolutely. Imagine you're this rookie, fresh out of college, maybe even straight from another country. Suddenly, you're in the NBA. Media's all over you, endorsements, you're managing money you've never even seen before.
It's got to be a whirlwind.
Total whirlwind. So the sources really emphasize how important veterans are during this transition.
It's like they have this built-in support system, right?
Exactly. Guys who've been through it all, guiding the rookies, not just on the court stuff, but everything. Media, locker room dynamics, finances. The sources even mention veterans sharing their own financial mistakes so the rookies can avoid them.
Wow, that's huge. It's like a masterclass in navigating the NBA, taught by the guys who've actually lived it.
Totally. There's this quote from one of the sources that really stuck with me. It said, "It's about preparing these young guys, not just for basketball, but for life."
That's powerful.
Yeah.
And it's not just a one-way street, right? The sources suggest that this mentorship is fulfilling for the veterans, too.
Oh yeah, for sure. Passing on their knowledge, seeing a rookie succeed because of their guidance, it reinforces that positive cycle within the team. It's pretty cool.
Okay, so mentorship's huge. But the source material also gets real about the strain this career puts on players' personal lives.
No doubt.
Yeah.
It's a tough balancing act. The travel, the media scrutiny, the pressure to perform at such a high level, it all affects their families.
Yeah, and the sources really dive into the impact on players' children, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. It's tough on the kids, no question.
One example that really got me was a player who reads bedtime stories over the phone to his kids every night while he's on the road. I mean, it shows the effort these guys put in to stay connected.
Yeah, that's great. And the sources mention how some teams are starting to do more to help with this, like offering travel programs for families, having on-site childcare at games.
So they're starting to acknowledge that a player's family is important.
Right. The idea is that a supported player is a better player.
Makes sense. Happy at home, strong on the court. But let's face it, there's another big piece of the NBA puzzle: money.
Oh yeah, big time. And for young players, all that sudden wealth can be as tough to handle as it is exciting.
Definitely. And our sources don't shy away from the potential problems, the scams, the bad investments, even pressure from family and friends.
It's a lot to deal with. It's like a crash course in financial responsibility,
Yeah.
but with really high stakes.
Absolutely. And that's why the league's efforts to educate players are so important. Our sources talk about all these financial literacy programs, advisors to help avoid scams, even education on how to set boundaries to protect their wealth.
It's about making sure they're financially secure, not just during their NBA career, but for the rest of their lives.
Okay, so we've got mentorship, family, finances, all those internal pressures. But what about the external pressure cooker of the media and public image? How do they handle that?
That's where relationship literacy takes on this whole other meaning. These guys are like mini corporations now, with fans, sponsors, media, all wanting a piece of them.
Right, and our sources detail how the league actually prepares them for this. It's pretty wild.
It is. Media training, social media strategy, even crisis management. They learn how to shape their public image, deal with tough questions. One source even said, you have to learn to control your narrative in this environment.
That's a great quote, because one wrong move and it's all over social media in seconds.
Exactly. But the sources also talk about the positive side of this, using their platform for good.
Like doing philanthropic work. Yeah.
Starting foundations, advocating for causes. It shows how relationship literacy goes beyond just protecting themselves. It's also about using their influence to make a difference.
So it's about more than just self-preservation. It's about giving back to the community. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, but I'm curious. What are some teams that really exemplify this idea? Like where we can see relationship literacy leading to actual success on the court?
Let's start with a classic example, the 90s Chicago Bulls dynasty. Our sources point to Phil Jackson as a true pioneer in this area. He understood that building a winning team wasn't just about athletic ability, it was about the team's mental and emotional state.
Right. He was way ahead of his time, bringing in mindfulness practices, doing team-building exercises, not the kind of stuff you usually associate with the NBA.
Exactly. And it worked. It created this incredible level of trust and communication that you could see in their performance on the court. Think about their offense, that fluidity, the way they seemed to read each other's minds. That came from a deep connection that was fostered off the court.
It wasn't just talent, it was a team that was truly united. And for a more modern example, the sources point to the Golden State Warriors dynasty.
Oh yeah, the Warriors are a perfect example. Coach Steve Kerr, he brought his own philosophy, emphasizing joy, compassion, that whole we over me mentality. The sources mention team meditation sessions, encouraging open communication, even about tough issues, creating an environment where players felt safe to be themselves.
And that led to their amazing run. They were known for their selfless play, their infectious team spirit. It's clear that both the Bulls and the Warriors, even though they were from different eras, had this one fundamental thing in common: a culture built on strong relationships.
And that's a key takeaway from the sources. Building a championship culture through relationships isn't a fluke, it's a real thing. It's happened time and time again in the NBA. It's not just some feel-good story. It's a key ingredient in building a winning team.
So we've talked about the role of coaches in creating this environment, but what about the role of veteran players in sustaining it?
The sources are full of examples of veterans taking younger players under their wing, offering guidance, sharing their experiences, helping them navigate all the challenges of being in the NBA. This mentorship is so valuable in passing down the team's values and traditions.
Right, so the culture continues even as players come and go. It's like creating a legacy that extends beyond individual careers. And it's a reminder that in a league as demanding as the NBA, where players face so much pressure and scrutiny, having that strong support system is absolutely crucial.
Couldn't agree more. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about another really important part of relationship literacy that we haven't touched on yet. The legal side of things. Contracts, endorsements, philanthropy. These are all areas where players need expert guidance.
It's like a whole other game within the game, right?
Exactly. And our sources emphasize how important legal advisors are in protecting players' interests, especially when it comes to contracts, which can be incredibly complex.
Right. It's not just about the money, it's about understanding their rights, making sure the terms are fair, and that the contract aligns with their long-term goals.
Right on. And legal advisors also play a big role in brand protection, helping players navigate all those endorsements, sponsorships, and managing their image rights. They're like guardians of their reputation and their financial future.
Think about it. These players have incredible earning potential, but they also face a ton of risks. They need to be smart about protecting their brand and making wise financial decisions.
Absolutely. The sources even talk about how important legal guidance is when it comes to philanthropy. Many players are passionate about giving back, but they need to understand the legal and tax implications of setting up foundations or making big donations.
It's a good reminder that even with the best intentions, it's important to have the right support in place. And speaking of support, let's circle back to one of the most crucial aspects of relationship literacy in the NBA: mental health.
Yeah, for sure. We've seen some progress in this area, but there's still work to do. The sources acknowledge how tough it can be for these guys. The pressure, the constant scrutiny, the possibility of a career-ending injury, it can really take a toll.
And it's not just about dealing with problems when they arise, it's about promoting well-being from the start, building resilience, encouraging balance in their lives.
Absolutely. The sources highlight how teams are doing more to address this, like incorporating mindfulness practices, making therapists available, and creating a culture where it's okay to talk about mental health.
That's great to hear. It's about recognizing that mental health is just as important as physical health.
Right. It's about breaking down the stigma and making sure players feel supported and empowered to seek help when they need it.
So we've covered a ton of ground in this deep dive. Team dynamics, personal relationships, financial management, mental health. It's pretty clear that relationship literacy is a big deal in the NBA.
It's not just about basketball. It's about building a solid foundation for a successful and fulfilling life, which is important no matter what field you're in, really.
Totally. As we wrap up this part of our deep dive, what's been the biggest takeaway for you? What stood out to you the most about this whole idea of relationships in the NBA?
You know, what really strikes me is how interconnected everything is. The relationships players build within their teams, with their families, their mentors, the media, even their legal and financial advisors. It all contributes to their overall well-being and success. It's a good reminder that we're all part of this bigger ecosystem, and the quality of our relationships has a huge impact on our lives.
That's a powerful insight, and it's something we can all apply to our own lives, whether we're athletes or not. Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to encourage everyone listening to think about this for a minute. What role do relationships play in your own life? How can you build stronger connections and use them to achieve your goals, create a more fulfilling future?
It's really interesting to see how these relationship literacy principles actually play out in real success stories in the NBA.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious about that. Who comes to mind when you think of teams that really nailed this?
Well, we already talked about the Chicago Bulls dynasty, right?
Yeah.
Phil Jackson, his approach back then was pretty revolutionary. He brought in mindfulness, encouraged open communication, built that sense of unity that went beyond the court.
It seems like he understood that to create a truly great team, you had to address more than just the physical side of things. You had to tap into the mental and emotional needs of the players.
Exactly. And it fostered a culture where players felt supported, trusted each other, and were willing to put the team's success ahead of their own individual glory. Take Michael Jordan, for example, arguably the greatest player of all time, known for his intense competitiveness, but even he bought into Jackson's philosophy. He recognized that true success comes from a collective effort.
It's true. Even the most talented individuals need a strong team to reach their full potential. And it's clear that Jackson's approach worked. The Bulls dominated the NBA for almost a decade.
Absolutely. And then you fast forward to the modern era, and you have the Golden State Warriors dynasty, another prime example of relationship literacy in action.
The Warriors were amazing to watch. That incredible teamwork, their selfless play, that almost telepathic connection they had on the court.
Exactly. And a lot of that can be attributed to Coach Steve Kerr's leadership. He created a culture based on joy, compassion, a we over me mentality. The sources talk about how he encouraged players to express themselves, to celebrate each other's successes, and to support each other through tough times.
It seems like he knew that a positive, supportive environment would not only make the players happier, but it would also bring out the best in their performance on the court.
Exactly. And it wasn't just about the coach either. The Warriors had a core group of veterans who really embraced this philosophy and helped to instill it in the younger players. Draymond Green, for instance. He was known for being a vocal leader, holding his teammates accountable, but he always did it with respect and a genuine desire to see them improve.
So it was a combination of strong leadership from the coach and buy-in from the players that created that winning culture.
Absolutely. And the results were undeniable. Multiple championships, record-breaking seasons, and a style of play that was both exciting and inspiring. It's clear that both the Bulls and the Warriors, even though they're from different eras, had this one crucial thing in common: a culture built on strong, positive relationships.
Okay, so we've seen how this relationship literacy thing has played out in these two really iconic dynasties. But I'm curious, how do players maintain these strong bonds when there are so many roster changes, trades, and free agency moves happening all the time?
That's a great question. It really shows how adaptable these guys are and how quickly they can form strong connections. The sources mention how players often stay in touch with former teammates, even after they've moved on to different teams. The friendships they build go beyond basketball, creating this network of support that lasts throughout their careers.
It's like a brotherhood forged through shared experiences and their love for the game.
Yeah, exactly. And it shows how powerful these relationships can be. They go beyond the business side of the NBA. These guys recognize that their connection with each other is valuable, something worth holding on to, even when they're on opposing teams.
It's a reminder that it's not just about winning or losing, it's about building meaningful connections that make their lives richer, both on and off the court.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And this focus on relationships also extends to how players handle their interactions with the media and the public. They understand the importance of building trust and rapport with reporters, fans, and sponsors, knowing that these relationships can have a real impact on their careers and their legacies.
Right. And the sources talk about how players actually get media training to help them navigate this whole world.
Exactly. It's about learning how to communicate effectively, how to handle tough questions, how to use their platform in a responsible way.
It's more than just saying the right things. It's about being genuine, engaging with fans in a real way, and using their influence to promote positive change.
Exactly. And that brings us to another key aspect of this whole relationship literacy idea: philanthropy. The sources highlight how many NBA players are actively involved in giving back to their communities.
Yeah, it's pretty inspiring to see.
It is. They use their platforms and resources to support causes they believe in, whether it's starting foundations, supporting education, or advocating for social justice. They're showing how powerful relationships can be when it comes to making a real difference in the world.
It's a good reminder that these guys are more than just athletes. They're role models, leaders, and they can be powerful agents of change. Their commitment to giving back really speaks to their character and their values.
Absolutely. It's also a reflection of the NBA's culture, which encourages players to use their influence for good and to give back to the communities that support them.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into NBA relationship literacy, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
For me, it's that relationships are the foundation of everything in the NBA. They shape team dynamics, influence player development, impact financial decisions, and even affect how players handle the public eye. It just shows how important strong, healthy relationships are for success in any area of life, whether it's sports, business, or just everyday life.
That's a great point. It's something we can all learn from. So as you continue to follow the NBA, I encourage you to look beyond the highlights and the stats. Pay attention to the relationships that are shaping the game. And as you go about your own life, remember the power of connection, communication, and trust. Build strong relationships, support those around you, and use your influence for good. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.